All right, everybody, welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today I have Beyanka Soleymanian with me. She is the marketing manager for Nureva. They are an innovating conferencing solution company. Beyanka, this is our second time talking. We talked at Exhibitor Live. Welcome back. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So cool conversation today. It's something that I talk about a lot, and I think it's a big topic in the industry, which is sort of like the event planner and the event marketer, because essentially a lot of the people like yourself, a lot of people working for corporations and companies, they do both. They're a planner, logistics coordinator, and event marketer kind of all mixed into one. It's a lot of responsibility, but you and I today are going to kind of try to draw a line between them and discuss sort of the difficulties, discuss some of the, I don't want to say benefits, but I'd say like strategies and ideas in those spaces and how to execute. You ready?
Let's go.
Awesome. Let's do it. So what do you think is the biggest distinction when people say event planner, event marketer? What do you think the big difference is here?
The way I think of it is event planning, it's all about meticulously planning, organizing, and executing on every detail, where event marketing can be that. But in addition to that, it's really thinking about the full attendee journey, telling a brand story, analyzing the data that you're hopefully getting out of it, things that really move the needle on pipeline.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm just writing this down here. I'm thinking to myself, it's really like planning and logistics versus what you said, attendee journey, the pipeline. They are just two totally different things. And I think, something you and I, but they're both necessary. I think part of the problem, and where you and I kind of hit it off when we were talking about Exhibitor Live, was the fact that because the logistics and the planning part is a necessity, like it's got to happen. If it doesn't happen, or if it goes wrong, everything is going to shit, and the marketing piece doesn't really matter. So it takes precedent, and a lot of people, inexperienced sometimes, or don't have the skill set or the training, they get lost in it, right? Because it's so important and it's got to happen. Whereas the marketing requires more strategy and more planning.
Yeah, it's the foundation. It's a foundation to a successful event. Just like building a home, you need to create the foundation first. Yeah, if you don't have a foundation built, how can you do all the extras? And unfortunately, people do think of the marketing side of it as the extras. So you need to make sure the management of logistics is smooth as possible, that every single detail has been thought of. You can't really expect someone to have a positive experience, like an attendee to have a positive experience, if those things are not in place. I think it's so easy to get lost and focus on just the logistics, because it is really critical. You only get one chance, and there is a lot at stake. You don't get second chances, unfortunately, to execute and produce an event.
At what point in your career do you think you sort of were able to stop focusing so heavily on logistics and planning and sort of be able to execute that well while thinking about the marketing, thinking about the attendee experience, thinking about your customers, either at a trade show booth or an event, and kind of how you're engaging them?
I think when I first started planning music festivals, it was very different from what I had done before. I was really focused on the marketing side of things. And just for me, like, we had to secure sponsors. And in order to do that, like, securing sponsors was incredibly important to their bottom line. And in order to secure sponsors, we had to do a lot of marketing campaigns. We had to create excitement and buzz around the talent in order to sell tickets. Because at the end of the day, at a show like that, a music festival, a concert, if you're not selling tickets, people aren't making money, and it's a failure. So creating buzz, and it was all about marketing that buzz to sell those tickets, was where I shifted things.
I think that's cool, because you saying that, it's kind of like, hey, I don't really have a choice here, right?
Yeah.
Where, I mean, and at the end of the day, events, trade shows, events, brand activations, festivals, wherever you want to label it, really at the end of the day, they are there to produce revenue. They are there to produce results. And that is the event marketer side of things. So it's a matter of kind of unlocking that. And what would you say, like, was there a mindset shift for you? Is there something that you started doing that worked right away? Anything like that?
Well, I think I was forced to really think differently, moving away from my natural need to plan logistics. Like, it's second nature to me. So it was really forcing myself to think differently. Because of that, I had to think really strategically in order to get attendees to these shows. So it was more than just planning and organizing all the logistics. It was really strategizing.
What's something that you think you do really well on the planning side? What's something that you think maybe you've executed well, a trick of the trade, tip for somebody else? I mean, where do you think you're strong on the planning side?
I really get uncomfortable talking highly of myself, but
that's all right. Give us something. Come on.
All right. I think my attention to detail, honestly, it helps me really excel in the planning process. So when my client shows up to an event, let's say, and things are going off without a hitch and things are seamless, or they seem seamless to the client, I get such an exhilarating feeling. Like that's what I love, is like the whole production of all the time that you've put in, is the actual producing of the event. But I know that you can't do that without meticulously planning. And I think my advice for every event planner out there is putting an emphasis on project planning and management. Like no detail can be overlooked. And if you're getting organized and really thoroughly planning out a project, that's my tip, because you can't fail. If you're planning every detail out and giving yourself the time to do that, then you really can't fail.
You know, attention to detail, one might say like, hey, oh, that's an obvious one. But I think it is obvious, but the importance of it is so heavy, because in events, like you can't wing it. You can't just say, oh, it'll be okay. You can't not check, like call the hotel and say, hey, what's the height of that? Or, you know, like, hey, is that a bay door, or is that a, like, you got to make the calls and say, no, show me a picture. Tell me exactly, because you know that when you don't have those details locked in, it is detrimental and things can go off the rails really fast.
Yeah. And I think everybody has a different standard of attention to detail. And everybody has a different definition of a standard of definition of attention to detail. Being obsessive, I think, I know people will the people that have worked with me will be like, yes, she's pretty obsessive. And it comes with the job. Like in order to succeed, you have to be like obsessed with it. So anybody can say they have attention to detail. I think you really notice it in the end, how that happened. Was it seamless? Did you plan? Did you have risk management, like contingency plans? Like, did you take every step to plan a seamless event? I think there's a difference between that and just saying I pay attention to detail and just doing the bare minimum.
You have any like specific recommendations for somebody that says like, hey, I really want to be detailed, right? Like any recommendations on how, any tips, any ways that they could, you know, like I know with us, we do a lot of the logistical work for our customers, for people like you. We kind of take it off your hands, right? And we have these checklists and these dates and these timelines and these ways of putting it all together out in front of us. Do you have anything like that that you've utilized, or just different ways of it?
I think it comes with experience too. Like when you're first starting out, it's like if I'm advising somebody that's just starting out in the industry, I would say it comes with experience. Like you can only do what you think is right until you've experienced some things and maybe witnessed some hiccups and learned from those experiences. But like for me, using a project management tool is critical to try to foresee all of those things. And also for me, like I did study event management and business, so I have that perspective. And then I also have like hands-on experience that I've been doing this for so long. So the way I plan events today is very different than how I planned them 15 years ago when I was first starting out in the industry. So I think, be easy on yourself, go through the motion, experience, learning from experience. Don't let your mistakes happen over and over and over again, really learning from those. And then also, you either have attention to detail or you don't. Like not everybody's meant to be an event planner.
You got it or you don't. You got it or you don't. That's it.
I know. I don't want to say it, but I am saying it because it's like you are a niche. Like not everybody can do this job.
Yeah.
Event planners and event marketers, they're a special kind of person. It's like I used to plan weddings, and I personally, like my colleagues in the industry will say, like, I cannot do weddings and I will never attempt them. So just because you're an event planner doesn't mean you can do everything, doesn't mean you should,
Yeah.
such as a wedding. That has a niche of its own. So I think you either have it or you don't, but you can really get better at that skill.
What's one piece that you just said that I really like? You didn't say it exactly, but I kind of heard it a certain way, which is you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So like you do to a degree have to learn like trial by fire, like, trial by error. Like you're going to make a mistake and be like, holy shit. Like that's what
Exactly.
happened when I did that. Or like, this is a really silly example, but way back in the day when we first started the company and first started getting going, myself and my account manager, I mean, we were a small company. We're like 4 people. Right. And we did not know that the electrical came from the ceiling in Mandalay Bay. We didn't know it.
Well, yeah, but that's not normal.
We learned it. We
Yeah.
learned, and it was a brutal lesson. And, we ate it with the client. And we just told them, we said, hey, like we screwed, but it's those little details that you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's big for people that are in your role, is that if the more important lesson is that you have to learn as you go. You got to say, hey, look, this happened. I will never let this happen at a hotel again. I will never let this happen in transportation again. And then you start learning, and that's how you get better.
Exactly. I mean, it's not normal for electricity to come out of a ceiling. So if you're somebody that's been planning conferences, like let's say in large hotels or conference centers, yeah, it doesn't come from the ceiling. And then you make a shift in a trade show, there's a lot more to learn. So different events have their niche, right? It's not everybody can do everything.
Agreed. What about on the marketing side? What about like in the experience, trying to execute a strategy, engage your customer, right? Deliver that experience that's like memorable, engaging, right? Immersive. What about on that side, like the event marketer side? Where do you think you're strong? What have you done well?
I think really thinking through the attendees' journey. Like, what do you really want them to experience? Because without that, you can just say, I have all these ideas and I'm going to execute on all these different things, on all these brand activations. But if you're not really thinking through the journey and putting yourself in their shoes and thinking from their perspective, once you do that, you can work backwards and really create an immersive plan and what that would look like, right? So I think something that I do well is I'm really able to understand the end result and what I want them to experience and feel and walk away with. From there, planning the different experiences you want. Maybe you want an activation, maybe you want a demonstration, like maybe you want a podcast at your event. You think it through.
How do you go about that? Because I love what you're saying, right? Like you're saying, I'm thinking about their journey. So whether it's when they walk into my event, walk into my festival, walk into my trade show booth, I'm putting myself in their shoes. And essentially you're kind of like saying, like, begin with the end in mind, right? Which
Absolutely.
is something. So
which is the objective, right? Like what's your objective? And then planning from there. Like for me, I think what's really important is taking time to do research. And oftentimes we're so busy. Most of us don't plan one event at a time. We're planning so many things, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed where you do cut back on things such as research. But I think that's critical. Researching the events that you're doing, researching the experience you want attendees to feel, and then how to create that. I'm a big fan of brainstorming. So once you've done your research, brainstorm a bunch of ideas. You don't have to execute on every single one, but really taking that time to research everything you can. That's how you're really going to understand what you want them to leave away feeling.
Yeah. So you're kind of building a foundation to create ideas or to understand where you're going from, right? You're kind of thinking about your customer, thinking about their journey, thinking about who they are, why they're there. And then you're sort of saying like, okay, let's try to deliver them something that at least makes sense for them.
Yeah, something that makes sense for them and for the business, right? Like you got to think about it both ways. Like, okay, these are the things that we want them to feel when they leave, but ultimately we need to make a sale. Like ultimately we want them to remember our brand. Like what is that going to look like for us?
I love what you just said there, how we want them, how we want to make them feel, right? That is a question that we have rolled into a little bit of our discovery and sort of like experiential design process with our customers is saying, how do you want someone to feel after they leave your trade show booth, after they leave your event, after they leave your brand activation? And it's interesting, the responses that you get from people. Some people are like, never thought of it. I have no idea what I want someone to feel. Some people are like, man, that's a great question. And they'll tell you, but then it opens up such a meaningful conversation as to what then the engagement, the activation, the experience looks like, because it gets people thinking about their customer. I love that.
Exactly.
It's a good thought. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how you start creating the experiential side of things, right? It's not just going through a checklist, making sure you have everything, logistics and then yes, I've thought about the promotion, so it's the marketing, how to get people to the show. That's all great too. But then I think there's a third part to the job, is the creating experiences, right? Like that's the experiential side of marketing. That's critical. You see now that people, like consumers and attendees, they're making their decisions based on an emotion that they felt, positive or negative. Like it's not always going to be positive. So how many times have you gone to a concert and remembered it a few years later, or 10 years, even a decade later? Like how often? It's things that trigger that experience that makes it unforgettable. So I want to create these memorable experiences where I'm evoking an emotion in somebody, and in 6 months when the show ends or the product launch is launched, what's going to make them remember me and our brand 6 months down the road, a year down the road, when they are making those buying decisions, right?
Yeah, that's such a good point, right? Because I think sometimes when people hear like experiential marketing, or they think like immersive, engaging, experience, these words thrown, people are like, oh, that's a bunch of like foofy bullshit, or that's blah, blah, blah. And what I've had those conversations with people where they tell me that, and I'll go back to them and I'll say, hey, like, let's talk about an experience that you've had that you remember, right? Like, tell me something, a trip you went on, you could, a hotel you visited, an experience dining at a restaurant, everybody that, and like, people don't understand what you're getting at here with this feeling is when you can create a feeling, it does get remembered. It then becomes an experience. So yeah, it's tricky to do. It's not easy, but you need to be striving and aiming for it all the time.
Yeah, you may not get it 100% of the time or with 100% of the attendees, but I don't think that should be the goal. It should be the goal to get to as many people as you can, to have them leave with a positive experience, positive impression of your brand, and then nurture that. It can't just be one event and then you forget about those attendees. Like, how are you going to nurture them? The research shows that consumers need, I think, between 6 to 8 touch points of a brand before they even make a decision. So it can't just be a one-time thing. You need to nurture that.
And what you said about, just made me think of it. You said positive experience, right? So people having these positive experiences. There's actually technology and cameras now where you can install them into your exhibits at your events, and it will gauge like how happy or how positive of an experience a person is having that is in your space for a set period of time. So, if you're doing multiple shows, activations, events, whatever it may be, you can pop these cameras in there and it will tell you like which demographic you're resonating with: men, women, older, younger, who's happy, who's not, who stopped, who left, who passed by. And it gives you the vibe. Like, if you don't have a very positive, delighted type of experience, it's like 30% of people, well, you probably haven't put a good enough experience out there for people.
Exactly. And that goes back to the data analysis. Like, you need that touch point, you need those answers basically to be able to plan better marketing programs, I think.
All right. So how in the past have you pitched your bosses on stuff with experience? And because I know a lot of stuff, as always, has to be run up the flagpole. We've done the running up the flagpole with people like yourself, right? Because we come up with ideas and then you're like, hey, we got to bring this to, Beth and John and whoever. And so we've done it. So how have you sold the ideas, to leadership?
Like, for me, I'm a visual person, so I try to do the same thing. Always bring an example and let them visually experience what I'm talking about, because I think words can only go so far. So letting them experience it, also presenting research on how it's helped previous events and other people, and then showing the return. I think you always have to show that return, whatever that might be, whatever your objectives were, how we'll see that come back. And then hopefully have some data that can drive that.
Yeah.
But then also a second part to that is also finding your ally within the organization. Like,
That's smart.
If you can find one or more decision makers that understand your vision, that are usually on board with your own personal brand and what you think is important, it makes it a lot easier to sell to the rest of them. It's that same idea of like, two brains are better than one. So yeah, when I'm pitching an idea, it's great to know that I have an army behind me that believes in the idea and I'm not just going in it alone.
I love that you said that. So two parts there. The first is the fact that understanding your audience when you're going to leadership is big, right? We've literally worked with event marketers, event managers that have told us like, hey, look, when we go up here, Dave's going to hate it. He's going to hate it right away. Yeah. And they're like, but Jennifer's going to love it. I'm telling you right now, that's the person, that's the one we, so, they do know sometimes. And then I think the other really good, vital piece of advice you just gave there is tie it to things that matter, goals and objectives. Don't just throw ideas out there and be like, hey, this would be cool. No. Right. It's tie it to what matters to the business. What are the business initiatives? What are the goals? What are objectives? What are things that are going on inside the company where you can prove to your leadership that you're not just a planner. You're a business person. You're thinking through the lens of what the business needs and the direction. I think that's really important to tie it all together, because ideas are just ideas. Ideas, you have to tie it together. I love that you brought that up.
And I think every detail, it's important to take it back up to the objectives. Like always thinking about the objectives in every decision you're making and pitching. Oftentimes that gets overlooked, right? Because you do think, okay, I just need to do something creative here. Like, how am I going to stand out? And then you can think of really cool ways to do it. But then if it doesn't go back to the objective and it doesn't make sense for that particular event that you're planning, it's really hard to sell.
Yeah. What about when you and I first talked? It was, I don't know, back in April, I think it was in Louisville. We talked about sensory engagement, which I thought was a really interesting point that you brought up. And I mentioned to you, the first thing I think about with sensory engagement is my car dealership. And every time I bring my car in to get serviced, the place smells incredible. Like when I walk in, I go to the service cube desk person, it smells amazing. And then I go wait and they have like coffee and all this stuff, but the smell in there, it is hard to be in like a bad mood when it smells so good. I don't know how to explain it. It was the first thing it made me think of.
Yeah. And for me, it's like hotels. Like, I think I was saying that to you, like for me, it's a hotel. Like how many times have you gone to a luxury hotel where they really do have a signature scent? Like, the Four Seasons, they have a scent. How often have you walked into a luxury hotel and just felt immediately, I'm about to get pampered just from the scent? Sensory engagement, I think, is so important because, using our senses to stimulate our mind and memory, and like how often do you remember something from your childhood that was triggered by a scent maybe, or even a sound, and you think to yourself, wait, why am I having this memory? It's because of that.
Yeah. One of the other things we talked about was like the visual is kind of the most obvious for events, but I think it gets passed up a lot. Like there's so much you can do with smell and sound and taste and things like that. There's a lot of cool things to do, but visually, I think you need to be thinking like, what is going to get someone to stop? What is going to get someone to be like, what is that? Whether it's with lighting, whether it's with art deco, whether it's with something like, what did I not recently, I saw something. It was a hanging structure in a trade show booth. And it was for a company that made leashes for dogs, cats, whatever. Whoever walks their, I've seen people walk pets. I don't know if they should be walking, but a leash, right?
Yeah.
And it was this hanging structure, and then it had all their leashes dangling from it. Like, I mean, like
It was so cool.
150 of them. It was visually stimulating. You couldn't, right? I mean, you can't walk past it without being like, oh, wow, look at all the, wow, that's crazy. And then you're like, oh, it's leashes. And then, oh, and then you connect the dot to what they're doing. And you're like, that's visually stimulating.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like thinking about the full journey again, like how you want them to leave. So if all the senses tie in together, if you have the right colors that you're using, the right lighting that you're using, scent,
Yeah.
sound, visually, like everything, if it ties in, you're telling a story without really using words. Like you're telling the
Yeah.
story of how you want them to feel when they leave.
So we spoke earlier, color psychology. You kind of just
Yeah.
touched on color. So tell us about that.
Again, thinking about your brand. What is that? What do you want the attendee to feel? And then designing whether it's a booth or just your event design is incredibly important. So for instance, if you want them to feel maybe passion or excitement, you might want to use the color red. Whereas like colors like blue are associated with calmness and tranquility. So it just depends on how you want them to feel. And it goes beyond events. It's interior designing. Like when people are designing
Yeah.
their nurseries at home, you'll notice a lot of them are using yellow. Why? Because it's positivity and it's happiness. That's what they want their kids to feel. That's the emotion that they're trying to evoke. So really strategically using colors, I think, can create an immersive experience that resonates with attendees. And then you can also like take it up another level in lighting. Like for me, lighting is so critical because you can tell a story
Yeah.
without ever speaking when you're using lighting. Like if you are using warm colors, warm lights, maybe it's great for a wedding and more
Mhm.
intimate styled events. Like they create romance. Like you want them to feel romance. That's what you want to do. Maybe at a trade show or an event, you use brighter lights, and that's
Yeah.
really great for networking and for parties and to really evoke like that more lively experience that you want from people.
I love lighting. I'm almost not allowed in the back of my warehouse anymore because I'm always like, put more lighting. But I always want more like down lighting, up lighting, soffits thing. I
Exactly.
always want more. And a good example, I think, to what you're talking about is how all of this stuff turns from, design and visuals and senses into events and trade shows and brand activations is like,
Yeah.
think about like landscape lighting on homes in neighborhoods, right? When you have like uplighting on houses at night, like it gives this feel, it gives this sense. I don't even really know how to fully verbalize it, but it's an elevated feel.
Yeah, it is. And it's a way of controlling the eye too. Like if you
Yeah.
want to tell a story, if you want them to focus on a specific element, it's a great way to be able to take them through that journey without actually physically telling them to do it or using words to do it. You're kind of the eye just goes
Yeah.
to where the lighting is. And I love being able to tell stories in creative ways. It's like a concert as another example
Yeah.
when when the lighting is choreographed with the sound, so the music, you can evoke emotions that you didn't even know you were about to feel when you're in a concert. Like I personally remember my very first concert I ever went to, because it really evoked emotions in me, and I was so wowed by the choreography between lighting and sound. It was amazing.
Can you share an example or two of times where you've kind of harnessed this, like you used sensory engagement or anything like that that would help people?
Yeah, so like at the music festivals, planning, there were large concerts, essentially outdoor
Mhm.
concerts. So the lighting team, we had different lighting teams than we did. We had staging teams. So it was a choreographed story that we told with our lighting and with the music that was being performed. And you could feel the energy. Like you could feel the thousands of people having this experience that you intended them to have, and them screaming and yelling and just like shouting to the rooftops and just really enjoying themselves. You know you've done it right, because if you have this in mind, you have this story that you're trying to tell and the emotions you're trying to evoke, and then you see it right then and there come to life. I think it's like the best example I can give of that. Other examples are like weddings, really planning out the lighting that you have. So pin spot lighting. I don't.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways. Up lights. Like there's different kinds of lights that you could do to tell a story. I think it's a critical piece of event design that sometimes does get overlooked because it can be expensive, and oftentimes you just don't have the budget to do that. But I think it's a critical part of event design.
Yeah, I mean, I think the extra steps are worth it. I think about time we built a trade show booth. It was a company that manufactured dog food, and their whole thing was like fresh ingredients. It was this whole thing. So we ended up, building like a produce section in the front of the exhibit, and we put fresh produce in it every day, and it was like sprayed with like cool water. It had the feel, the look, the smell, the whole thing of like being in a grocery store with fresh produce, where it was misting, had like the mist a little bit to it. And it's just those things help connect the dots for people on who you are and what you do.
It's like pop-up stores. If you have clothing or whatever it might be, and you're an e-commerce business and people really want to touch and feel and use those senses that they have, that's why pop-up stores do so well. Or if you have a product that you want people to sample, maybe having some products to sample at a show also helps to resonate, and that creates that memory. Like, oh yes, I went to the show and I tried the product and I know I love it, rather than just talking about it.
Yeah, I think those extra steps are absolutely worth it. I'm always telling people you have to be thinking this way. And, not like too big of a rant, but I think trade shows in particular on the B2B side, the world's changed a lot. And, 10 years ago, people went to trade shows because it was a third party place where like you just sort of, you had to go to be there because the internet hadn't matured to where it's matured to now. And it's like, so it was like the value of being there was like this was this congregation. It still is to a degree, but because of the maturity and the platforms and the technology, the trade shows are different. So you have to go that extra step. You cannot just show up. You can't just show up with a booth and be like, hey, this is our booth. It looks like 800 other booths here, but you got to take these extra steps, and you can engage your customer and you can win them over in those spaces.
Yeah, how are you going to stand out? I mean, if you can, again, put yourself in their shoes and the attendees' shoes and look at things through their perspective, if they're going through 200 booths a day, how are they going to remember you? It's sensory overload for anyone that's been at a trade show. Everything is so over the top that you get so stimulated where it's easy to forget about what you've seen even. So if you're not doing the extras to stand out amongst 800 other booths, then you're going to get forgotten and lost in the end.
All right, so let's do a couple close to closing questions here. We'll do a little kind of like rapid fire here. What's your biggest struggle as a marketing manager?
No judgment, right? Judgment-free zone.
No judgment here at all.
I think I've struggled with being taken seriously, like as marketing being taken seriously. Sometimes it gets looked at as fluff, and it's not. I think it's a critical part to the business strategies. It's not just fluff, it's imperative.
I like that one. We've done a whole show on how to sort of bring things and get buy-in with your senior leadership. We're even going to do a panel show down the line here with multiple event marketers, and that will be a piece of the topic, because what you're saying about being taken seriously, like I always think that I always encourage event marketers to be thinking in business terms, like get out of the planner mode. You got to plan. It's got it. Like, like we said, you got to plan. It's got to happen. You got to do well, but ask the business questions, be thinking like, what does this produce? What are our objectives? What are the results that leadership wants? Be thinking big picture and trying to execute that way, because then hopefully that struggle doesn't exist once you're doing that, or, once you get out of it. What's most important to you when you're choosing like a trade show event activation type of partner? What are you looking for? Because obviously that's a huge weight when you have somebody that's good. What do you need from them?
Like as an event planner, like you're nothing without your vendors and suppliers, like it's a team effort. So I think that's just picking the right people, absolutely critical to your success. So the things I look for are their experience in the industry, testimonials, like what have they done in the past and what are their reviews. And the RFP process is really critical. It's a way to kind of get your questions answered. I think who's doing something really creative and thinking outside the box is important. Somebody who's understanding our brand and isn't just doing a cookie cutter pitch. Like, I don't want to feel you're pitching me and 5 other companies the exact same thing. I want it customized. I want to feel like you care about this.
Yeah, those are good points. You know, you mentioned the RFP. We actually did an episode on RFPs, and I sort of like stress so hard to people, make companies like mine, make them take you through a great process and judge them based on the process that you're being taken through. Because a lot of people go to these RFPs and they try to cookie cutter everything so that everybody is, you know, so that it's fair and so that everybody gets to deliver the same thing and ask the same questions. That is that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you got to make companies, whether they're agency partners, you know, trade show event, booth builders, whatever you want to call my world, make them take you through a good differentiate them by the process they take you through, the questions they ask. You know what I mean? Like I always say you'll feel
you'll know.
If you're you'll know, you'll feel it. You'll be like, man, they're good. They're asking great questions.
Absolutely.
You build this trust in the process.
Absolutely. And you also know when it's a cookie cutter. Like, I know when I've been doing this for a while. I know when I'm reading through 5 RFPs, I know who's really thought about the experience, our brand, and what they want us to feel versus they've pitched us many times. I can tell.
You know what's funny? I found this funny. We won business the other day, and my AE was telling me, she was explaining it to the whole sales team. We're having a discussion about our projects and clients. You know, we do it weekly. And she said, like, we didn't even design anything yet. And they awarded us the business. And she literally pushed back in the process and said, I don't want to design you anything. We're not there yet. We're having these conversations. At that point in time, when she said that, they had already received like 2 or 3 other designs and full mock-up things. And that got the person thinking, like, well, how did they get these to us so fast? And why is this person telling me that we're not there yet? And why is this conversation so different? And it kind of woke them up to be like, hey, tell me more. And they asked, like, why are we not there yet? And she starts explaining. And then they're like, oh, well, wow, this is okay. This is what we want. Let's move forward. I'm telling you, it's everything you're saying. I hope is spot on, but it's
yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. I've had a pitch before where they've used the incorrect product. Like, it was a competitor's product. And I was like, oh dear. Like,
oh, wow.
It is so obvious.
Oh, wow.
Terrible.
That's terrible.
And you do go back, like, you have to tell them, like, hey,
damn,
I've noticed it's not our product, it's our competitor's product. And obviously they know that they've lost it at that stage because it is a cookie cutter process and people feel like they're so rushed all the time. We're all rushed. We live in a rushed society and you can just tell, but then you can also tell like the really great ones, which is amazing because I have had a process where I've had 10 pitches, and how do you pick the one? Like, the one usually stands out very clear. And I just want to feel 100% confident I'm going to have the best experience with that partner. And that's usually what I can get when I read through the different proposals.
Love that. It's a good answer there. I usually like to close with this. What is advice to your younger self? It's one of my favorite questions. I love Ron. Yeah, no, I just love hearing people. Some people give me like event marketer advice, some personal, some mixtures of them. I always love this question. What's advice to your younger self?
Honestly, I think just like being very true to yourself, knowing what you want, what's going to make you happy for one, and not to be so hard on yourself if you don't have all of the answers, because in this industry, you can't have all the answers from day one. It's something that's formed over the years. So don't be so hard on yourself, and all your hard work and long hours will pay off in the end. And one day you're, going to do so well and you're going to inspire others in the industry. I think that's what I would say.
Nice. Beyanka, this was fun. Again, 2 times now. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking with me. And I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. That's a wrap. Event Marketing Redefined. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.